Good morning. My name is Joanna Alexander, and my pronouns are she, her. I am this morning's worship associate. If you want a visual, I'm a mid-height, middle-sized elder with very white hair and wearing a kind of a French sailor-inspired tunic in blue. I volunteer to do this because your smiling faces warm my heart each time I do. Thank you for being here. And a shout out to those online via the Zoom platform. The worship team reads your chat comments, values your input, and we are so glad that you're here today. Light your chalice at home and settle in with us. Whoever you are, whomever you love, whatever your image of the holy, we are glad you're here. It is good to be together. If you are new here, there's a welcome area over in the south foyer where you can meet and talk to one another directly after the service. Coffee and snacks are available in the back corner, so grab a cup and plate and come chat with us. Orders of service are available online via the QR codes that you'll find around the building. And if you would like a paper copy, greeters, signal the greeters and they'll bring you one. This church is so active. We have so many things going on, and it is just too much to announce it all. The weekly connections email has all of our upcoming events and announcements. You can sign up by filling out a visitor form at the table in the hallway, or it's being dropped in chat, I imagine. And please make sure you get a copy of our handy guide to Sunday worship service. It will give you all the information you need about accessibility, joys and sorrows, the order of service, and coffee hour activities. A quick reminder, please pick up your pledge packets if you haven't done so already and save us postage. Let's see. We also have copies of the first draft of next year's budget. Some of you asked for that, and they are on the table as well. Now, for the drum roll, I am pleased to introduce our guest preacher today. C.B. Beal is a Unitarian Universalist preacher, storyteller, and educator who specializes in facilitating, I'm missing, learning experiences that involve issues of marginalization, oppression, and privilege. Prior to consulting full-time, they were the director of religious education at the Unitarian Society of Northampton and Florence in Massachusetts for 16 years. CB received a Master of Divinity from Union Theological Seminary in New York in 1991 and was awarded the Unitarian Universalist Association's 2019 Angus H. McLean Award for Excellence in Religious Education. We are very excited to welcome you today. Thank you for sharing your message and ministry with us. Right after the service, CB will hold a Zoom-only meet and greet, a treat for you on Zoom, so they can see your faces and enter into dialogue with you. You will need to switch from the Zoom webinar we're on now and use the meet and greet link that will be dropped into chat near the end of the service. This link can also be found in the weekly connections and on our website. Now, let's enter our worship time by lighting the chalice, symbol of our Unitarian Universalist faith. Judy Shaw will be lighting the chalice as I share these words from Lee Kinvey, they, them, the sabbatical minister of First Parish Church of Groton, Mass. This chalice is for the living, for changing, the becoming. This chalice is for losing the script of your life, the chapters about who you are in other people's stories. This chalice is for the lost GPS that was supposed to show you how to get where they expected you to go. This chalice is for skipping the directions, coloring outside the lines, painting, not by number, but by silence, by wild abandon, with a brush you made yourself from light deep inside. Startling, vivid, a new voice that already knows you. Finally, a true story.
Hello, everyone. My name is Judy Shaw. My pronouns are she, her. I have sad news to share with you. Felicia Sanders, Lacey, the wife of Daniel Blades, mother of Serena Benjamin, sister of Naja Sanders, stepmom to Sophie and Felix, Oma to Charlotte, aunt to Davis, friend and family to many, died last evening, surrounded by loved ones. Her passing was peaceful. She led us in dance many times, and she'll be missed.
Okay, and now let's say together the words of our mission, which affirm our shared purpose. Empowered by love, we transform ourselves and serve our world.
These are the words of Donna Markova. I will not die an unlived life. I will not live in fear of falling or catching fire. I choose to inhabit my days, to allow my living to open me, to make me less afraid, more accessible, to loosen my heart until it becomes a wing, a torch, a promise. I choose to risk my significance, to live so that which came to me as seed goes to the next as blossom, and that which came to me as blossom goes on as fruit.
Good morning. My name is Ryan Doppelmayr. My pronouns are she, her. I am your director of faith formation. I'm wearing some purple and some black. I'm a middle-sized woman with short hair, and I am going to invite anyone who'd like to hear a story to come a little closer. I am excited today because I get to listen to the story too. CB is an excellent storyteller, and they are going to share the story of Spork with us. So I am going to come down and grab a carpet rectangle and listen with you. But as you're making your way down here, I want to remind you that tomorrow is makeup day. What? For the NAACP Martin Luther King Jr. March that was supposed to happen on Martin Luther King Day, except for that silly ice storm we had. So, if you would like to join Rev Jen and some fellow UUs, look for the yellow shirts at Autzen Stadium tomorrow at 9. The march starts at 9:30, and it should be an awesome event. And with that, I'm going to ask CB to take it away.
I'm going to tell the story this morning that is a retelling of the picture book story Spork. And because it's a picture book, I'm going to introduce to you the central characters in this story, because the only picture you get is me. Okay. So a spork, the central character, its parents, the fork and spoon, and there's various other cutlery. Later in the story, a toddler comes upon the scene quite suddenly. Spork was neither spoon nor fork, but a bit of both and also neither. Spork had two parents who both thought Spork was perfectly sporky, but Spork stuck out. In the kitchen, forks were forks and spoons were spoons. Cutlery customs were closely followed. Mixing was uncommon. The forks and the spoons knew who they were and what they were for. Now, naturally, there were rule breakers, knives who loved chopsticks and tongs who married forks, but such families were unusual. Spork spent most of their time tucked in the bottom corner of the back drawer in the kitchen. You know the drawer. It's the one with the 5 corn-on-the-cob forks and the 3 plastic straws in that old can opener that sticks that we keep around for when the good can opener has gone missing. When Spork came out of the drawer to sit on the countertop, the other utensils would say, "Hey," and move on. They'd sometimes forget they had met Spork many times before. They might ignore Spork completely, and some would ask intrusive, rude questions. One day, after the billionth time Spork was asked, "Have you been coming here long?" And, "What are you anyway?" And, "Has your body always been like that?" And the zillionth time Spork was passed over when the table was being set, Spork sighed and thought, "It must be easier to be a single thing." And Spork decided to pick just one thing to be. Spork thought to start by fixing their head, and they put on a bowler hat to look more spoonish. But the forks thought that Spork was too round. Then Spork made a paper crown to look more forkish. The spoons thought Spork was too pointy. Spork wondered if there were other lonely creatures out there with no matching kind who never got chosen to be at the table, who didn't really belong. They wondered if there was an egg beater rolling pin, or a garlic press ice cream scoop, or a spatula teapot. But Spork never met them. At dinner time, Spork watched from the counter while the spoons played pea hockey in skillfully balanced boiled eggs. Spork sat off to the side while the forks raked fancy patterns in mashed potatoes and twirled noodles around in complicated circles like rhythmic gymnastics. At the end of this and every other meal, Spork looked on while the others enjoyed a fabulous dip in the pool. There were even bubbles and a spongy massage. But Spork was there, watching from the counter, and then shuffled back to their drawer. Then one day, a messy thing arrived. This messy thing had obviously never heard of cutlery customs or table manners. No, it had its way with the spaghetti. It giggled to see peas bounce and spread across the floor in great patterns of escape. No cutlery customs at all. This messy thing smeared and spilled and flung and clumped and dripped without a care. "Wait," said the forks, but the messy thing did not wait. "Bling!" "Oh, careful," said the spoons, but the messy thing was not careful. "Smear." "Oh, help," said the forks, while the messy thing continued to slop and splatter. "Quick," said the spoons. They didn't know what to do. Now, a fork may be good for poking and picking, and a spoon may be fine for scooping and stirring. But this messy thing, with its slurpy and clumpy half-finished food bits, it needed something else. Something that could do all sorts of things at once. Something flexible and easy to hold. Something that was neither spoon nor fork, but a bit of both and also neither. The utensils looked around and suddenly saw Spork. They gasped, and they immediately felt this really complicated mixture of excitement and relief and embarrassment. And that is the moment that Spork leapt off the countertop, over the cutlery drawer, and landed on the high chair with a big doot-to-doo. The messy thing saw Spork, and its eyes got big, and it gobbled its curiosity. It grabbed Spork and held Spork motionless in its fist. It tapped Spork up and down and let out a cheerful shriek. It was just the best thing ever. And that is not the next line. That is how Spork happily and joyously and finally found their way to the table. And the cutlery, having realized the mistake was theirs all along, immediately had a meeting and voted unanimously to dismantle and completely reconstruct the kitchen and the drawers. They asked Spork what Spork needed and others. They listened. They bore witness to lives they had previously not understood or even noticed. In the end, there was a space for Spork and a proper space for the 5 corn-on-the-cob forks and 3 plastic straws and old can opener that sticks. They built new spaces that would properly fit the egg beater, rolling pin, garlic press, ice cream scoop, and yes, the spatula teapot. They learned about Spork, and they began to notice when they were unfriendly. They began to interrupt each other if someone asked an intrusive or rude question. They stopped asking Spork and their friends to prove their experience, and they simply started learning about their experience. Well, as they did these things, they learned more about themselves than they thought they already knew. But they found out there was a whole subgroup of forks and spoons that would really rather play board games than spend so much time in the pool. Yep. And there were knives who wanted to hang out in the garage with the hatchets. They had been so busy thinking they knew who they were. It hadn't occurred to them they were already so many things at one time. When they finished the kitchen remodel, they left a couple of empty spaces too. Spaces that were intentionally constructed with flexibility for whomever came next. The table was for all, so the organization had to be as well. And they all agreed that Spork was perfectly sporky. Just a little bit round, just a little bit pointy, just right.
Good morning. My name is Nancy Buffum,
And I'm Joe Dellert.
and we're here to speak to you from the heart about what this congregation and this church mean to us. Joe and I joined UUCE last spring, but we started coming during the pandemic while we were still living in San Francisco. We were considering moving to Eugene, and we wanted to know the community that we would be coming to. We joined Beloved Conversations, each of us in a different group, so that we would meet some of you before we came here. And when we had a chance, we visited when it was permitted to come in person. But you know what? Being here in person and being with you all is much better. But we love Zoom, and hello to everyone on Zoom. And if it's raining really hard or we get up too late, we come on Zoom. So some of the things we've been involved with, we've volunteered in the Sunday school. Joe's been in the pre-K room, and we have done a couple of cups, pagan things, the maypole and the lugnasa making of the corn dollies. We went to the camp out just to eat dinner. We didn't spend the night, but that was a possibility, so we took advantage of that and met more of you there. And we took part in the Faith in Action walk through the Santa Clara neighborhood to talk to people door to door when the anti-Semitic hate packets had been thrown on people's lawns. And as much as we can, we are here.
Yeah, and so that's what we did. But I wanted to share the fact that you're all part of our dream, because 4 years ago we decided to move to Eugene, and we dreamed up our community of River Song. We dreamed you up, and thank you.
So this is about our pledge, our annual pledge drive. We're increasing our pledge this year by 10%, and I have a goal of looking at our finances this year, and I want to give more. But right away, I know that our church needs us. We all need each other, and our church needs us to pledge as well. And so we will be increasing our pledge this year. As of Thursday, the last information that we had, the church has received $280,000 in pledges, which is almost half of the $585,000 that we need to make our budget work. So after the service today, that's a place to go to make your pledge right here. If you're feeling it from the heart at the end of this service, you can also do it online or take your packet and mail it back or bring it back next week. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Each week we come to this gathering with both joys and sorrows. You are welcome to write those in our book, light a candle, or place a stone in water, over in the joys and sorrows area. Here are entries from our book today. Gratitude for fellow UUs globally to meet in Paris. Holding in our hearts all who are grieving. Missing Nisko. Remembering with gratitude Alexei Navalny. Don't give up. Strength and healing to Howard and Bill Fine. For all of these joys and sorrows, and for those that remain in the silent sanctuaries of our heart, may we all be grateful for the fullness of life and for the depth of love that is able to hold everything in its tender care. Thank you, all the musicians, and good job, AV crew. You got the lyrics up on time. That's great. Now, David Bakoven and I are going to do a responsive reading. Be sure you speak. By James Baldwin. For nothing is fixed.
Forever, forever, forever.
It is not fixed.
The earth is always shifting.
The light is always changing.
The seas do not cease to grind down the rocks.
Generations do not cease to be born, and we are responsible to them because we are the only witnesses they have.
The sea rises, the light fails. Lovers cling to each other, and children cling to us.
The moment we cease to hold each other,
The moment we break with faith with one another,
the sea engulfs us and the light goes out.
It can be said that Unitarian Universalists are particularly wordy people. In fairness, look what I do for a living, okay? And let's be honest, you can settle in for the next good while. Get comfortable. We spend a lot of time talking about what we think is true. We think about something, decide what's right, and take positions on things. But here's the thing. None of that was what Spork needed to become part of the kitchen community. As much as we UUs love to think, talk, argue, and search for truth and meaning, these activities alone do not build trust. They might build knowledge or awareness. They might build the kind of connection that comes from striving together with common purpose. But talking about our ideas doesn't build trust. Talking about our lives and having our truth received and held dear, that does. Trust is more an emotional than cognitive experience. And if we are part of a religious tradition that prides itself in and maybe even prioritizes thinking, well, we have to work all the harder to build trust. Spork had no reason to trust the utensils that were in charge, not simply because they ignored Spork, but also because they simply did not know or care about Spork's life. They did what they had always done the way they'd always done it. They didn't know to make space for Spork, what Spork was like or what they needed or what they cared about. So Spork had no feeling of connection or care, of trust with them. In reconstructing the kitchen, the other utensils set aside their assumptions about how things should be. They spoke with Spork and learned about Spork's life and the lives of others who are both like Spork or different from Spork and themselves. They began to read books, listen to podcasts, watch videos, and follow people on social media who offered new information, perspective, and experience. They didn't simply notice there was a problem with the drawers and build a new one that was identical to the first, but bigger. They connected with Spork in a way that meant that later on they would not ignore Spork in another situation. They would know Spork deeply and be in a trusting relationship. And Spork could trust them because they had made themselves trustworthy. They restructured everything by changing their perspective, their behavior, and their environment. In congregational life, with discussions of funding and polity, Article 2 and the next social justice project, we spend a lot of time searching for what is right, what is best. When we're each striving to be right, though, we're living in our cognitive brain competing for rightness. It becomes a battle sometimes, and battles are not beloved community. Now, don't misunderstand me. In the right circumstances, this competing for rightness, this battle, it is necessary. We battle systemic racial oppression. We battle patriarchal and transphobic laws about controlling people's right to bodily autonomy and healthcare. We battle police misconduct. We battle encroaching fascism in our towns and legislatures. And if arguing and battling is our most common, even perhaps most comfortable way of interacting, it interferes with building beloved community. Even if it's not our preferred way of interacting, it's often what we were raised on. Bearing witness is different. When we bear witness to people as they share about the experiences of their lives, we must consistently notice and set aside our thoughts, assumptions, assessments, and judgments. We must notice and set aside those things that don't make sense to us because we don't yet have the whole picture. We must recognize when what we're bearing witness to is so different from our experience that we must be careful we don't dismiss it out of hand. When we bear witness, we prioritize the story someone else wishes to tell over the questions we have, where we would like their story to go, and how we might mentally fill in the gaps in the story. We return simply to what they share. We continuously notice and set aside our assumptions. When we can still our minds and be present with someone, then we're able to express meaningful empathy. We make space to say, wow, that must be hard. Or, oh my goodness, I am so sorry that happened. You did not deserve that. Or, that is amazing. I am so honored that you shared that with me. When we tell the stories of our lives, people have the opportunity to hold space for the unveiling of more of us. And I don't mean here just chit-chat about our grandkids' sports ball game, humble bragging about a promotion, or an info dump about our favorite hobby, but stories of our struggle for survival, curiosity about who we are and why we do what we do, our learning and growing. When we bear witness to the stories of people's lives, we take seriously what we were taught about others and consider how, or even if, that teaching was true. This is especially true and extra complicated when we who bear witness do so from a position of relative privilege to the experience of the person sharing. It's not a one-to-one zero-sum sharing game. It's an opportunity to notice, reflect, and grow. Now, this isn't the same as agreeing with a political opinion. It's meeting one another at the center of humanity, where we share how the world impacts us, what it's like to be us in a world that may or may not appreciate our uniqueness. It's not about what we think. It's about who we are and who we are together, and whether we can recognize that other people have vastly different experiences in life, that society impacts them in ways we cannot imagine on our own. But we so often do not experience people bearing witness. We often don't experience people setting aside what they already think. Or we all too often experience people who are uncomfortable with what we share, who try to move the feelings away from them to fix us or our situation, or worse, tell us our experience is wrong. When I was a kid growing up on a small, stony farm, I only knew about two genders, girl and boy. And I had two choices within girl or failed girl, just as within boy, there was boy or failed boy. Where I lived, they called a failed girl a tomboy, and they called a failed boy a sissy. People policed what a girl or boy was. I didn't have an individual right to identity. Society decided that for me, and I was to capitulate, to cram myself into one or the other, boy or girl, man or woman. People constantly told me my gender was wrong. As I got older, I worked hard for the words to describe my gender. I'm butch. That worked in the 80s for a little while. I'm a masculine center person. Look, I'm a tomboy farm girl. But none of these words really fit right. And for a long time, I just strung them together, and I would say, I'm a butch, queer, tomboy, farm girl, masculine center, womanish type person. Well, in the many decades since I was that child, we have developed more understanding, increased knowledge, and better language. There's now a much simpler word for my gender, coined not by society at large deciding for me, but by people who share my experience of gender. I'm genderqueer. I'm non-binary, a gender that does not fall into the Western cultural idea of man and woman as opposites. I'm trans, meaning a cross from the gender that people expect me to have as a person in a body that has been called female. Not a man, not a woman, sort of both and also neither. People regularly tell me I'm wrong about my gender. Broken. There's a term called gaslighting you may be familiar with. It means to manipulate someone into questioning their sanity. It comes from a movie of the same name, and in that movie, an abusive husband attempted to make his wife think that she was mentally unwell, to question her own perceptions by, among other things, adjusting the lighting, a gas lamp, downward. When she would say, "It's dark in here," he would say, "No, it's not." He repeated this until ultimately he was pretending to read the newspaper in the pitch dark. "It's dark in here." "No, it's not." The goal of gaslighting is to get someone to disbelieve their own perception of reality and replace it with someone else's. This is different than discussing or persuading someone to think differently. Gaslighting is intended to manipulate someone into not trusting their own experience. This happens all too often in our lives. People who are like Spork, people who experience their gender in a different way than broader society tells them they're supposed to, these people are gaslit every single day. People say, "There's no such thing as trans. There is no such thing as non-binary. There have been men and women for thousands of years." The reasoning usually boils down to some version of, "I'm not non-binary, I'm not trans, and it doesn't make sense to me, so I don't believe you." This is a far more familiar experience than it may seem at first. Those of us who are survivors of dysfunctional families and abuse, or of illnesses like long Lyme, long COVID, fibromyalgia, ME/CFS, chronic fatigue syndrome, and other post-viral illnesses that other people, even doctors, told us didn't exist and we didn't have. Or heck, as simple as how many of us were told there was no such thing as PMS or cramps, even as we were weeping in pain. We have experienced being surrounded by people who tell us we're wrong or broken. We know that feeling of being gaslit. There are those of us who were told we were bad and lazy when it turned out we were neurodivergent, but nobody understood it back then. We've experienced people tell us our experience is not valid because it differs from theirs, so it must be all in our head, made up. Some version of, I don't have that, I've never heard of that, I don't believe you. And then it's even more broadly true for those of us who are survivors of and live with pervasive sexism, racism, homophobia, transphobia, ableism, and other supremacist systems of oppression. Some people say, well, I've never seen that oppression like you described. It's not that bad. I don't believe you. Therefore, it's not true. And I must acknowledge that I've been on both sides of this, both the person whose reality is challenged by someone else, and as the person who used my own experience to judge others. If you have me back sometime, I'll share just some of the ways I am my very own cautionary tale. But for right now, this. I come from about 400 years of Puritan and other settler New Englanders, from people with names like Harbottle Grimscott. And regardless of your personal family history, if you're you are deeply bound up in this history as well. We come from generations of people who, when someone dies, says, well, that's too bad, got to get on with it, there's work to do. This is how I was raised. I come from people for whom grieving is private and internal and set aside as quickly as possible. Feelings, if you must have them, are meant to be things that flash past, darting like a bird that never lands. In our own judgment, we're raised to know is going to be right. We are raised to believe that we always know best. Now, it's complicated because dad was right and mom was right. And I mean, yeah, this is not uncomplicated with self-esteem and sexism and all sorts of stuff. But at its core, we were raised to believe that we were the smartest. Well, at knowing facts and things and what to do. Not maybe the smartest at feelings, which were distractions at best. I grew up knowing only 3 feeling words: mad, sad, and what was the other one again? Oh yeah, mad. This also means that since I come from people who were never taught what it is to deeply experience what we're experiencing, our Puritan roots and family cultures lead us sometimes even to gaslight ourselves. We were never supported to find words for our gender, to fully experience grief or other big emotions. So much of our whole culture prioritizes what we should be, how we should be, and what we should feel over learning who we actually are. If we aren't taught to notice, honor, and bear our own feelings and experience, how can we possibly bear witness to others or express meaningful empathy? So many of us were never taught how to be present with other people's feelings and experiences. We were taught instead to rely on our own thinking, on our experience, on the idea that what we were taught was right, and someone sharing a different experience would have to prove us wrong. Experience was treated the same as ideas. This would turn out to be more unhelpful than our families and communities had hoped. Now, some of us, upon realizing this, or when we discovered that our coping mechanisms that kept those pesky feelings at bay had accidentally turned into a drug or alcohol problem, we joined support groups or recovery groups. Others of us joined covenant groups and small group ministry. We may have been flummoxed when we first enter these rooms as people sat quietly listening while someone else talked. I started out being judgmental of other people, taking up so much time talking about themselves. Oh my goodness, what an ego-driven thing, I thought. Wow, sure is all about me in here. I'd been taught that anything about me was too much. Others of us took to it like fish to water. Finally, I can talk about my life without being interrupted, corrected, or scolded. Over time, I realized that this is such an important part of how humans grow, connect, and develop trust in relationship. That it's a core part of beloved community to learn to attend to one another deeply and trust that other people will attend to us deeply. We can share at our own pace, trusting that people will believe what we say about our experience and care for us even when it is hard for us to care about ourselves. In beloved community, we learn that people will maintain our confidence, protect our autonomy, and hold space for us to be different and then celebrate all of us together. We learn that there are those who will join us in making changes to create more flexible and responsive spaces and processes. In beloved community, we learn to bear witness to the emerging consensus among marginalized people as to the impact of marginalization and oppression on our lives. For so many of us, this is the opposite of how we grew up. So many of us are just now learning to notice and tell our truth and bear witness to others at the same time, sometimes late in life, sometimes only after decades of believing we had a handle not only on what life is like, but that it's like that for everyone. In small group ministry and covenant groups, recovery or therapy groups, we learn to just listen, to suspend judgment, and to notice and dismiss or check out assumptions. You know, after a while, we find ourselves doing it elsewhere, bearing witness to people. We start noticing and resisting the impulse to be right every moment, or tell someone what to do, or fix it for them. We begin to resist the impulse to do anything that would move these uncomfortable feelings away from us. We bear witness to friends, we bear witness to colleagues, we sit and hold space for people after tragedy. We learn to be present with someone's feelings without taking them in, to be empathetic without drowning in emotion. Next thing you know, we're bearing witness willy-nilly all over the place, I promise. In the supermarket, last story, I was doing a big stock up on staples just before the pandemic began. There was a man in his 80s with that bent and gnarled but stalwart posture that my dad has, and he stood confused but quite determined in the soup aisle. There's a lot of soup in the soup aisle. Yeah. I paused and I said, "Are you okay? Can I help?" He asked me if I knew where the mushroom soup was. There's a few different brands. I said, did he know which one he wanted? He told me he didn't really know. His wife always cooked, and he didn't know what to get now that she died. I stood there for 10 minutes as he shared about his wife and her cooking, about how confusing the grocery store is and how he regretted never going with her to shop. In the end, we identified she made a really creamy mushroomy soup, and I helped him choose 2 to try. But mushroom soup wasn't what he needed that day. I mean, sure, he needed to buy it, but what he needed was someone to see him, to bear witness to the way his life had completely changed, to how he was bereft and didn't know how he would continue moving forward. It was an honor to stand there with him in that aisle. When we are present, noticing and setting aside our own assumptions in order to simply be present with someone, we open ourselves and them up to new possibilities. When we try not to control those possibilities or the outcome, but just let it happen, miracles of connection, of trust will occur. And what happens is nothing like what we expect, and so much more beautiful. Amen. Blessed be, and may it be so, because we make it so.
Now, after the chalice extinguishing, stay tuned for CB's benediction. We extinguish, let's say it together. Our shared extinguishing. We extinguish this flame, but not the light of truth, the warmth of community, or the fire of commitment. These we carry in our hearts until we are together again.
As you move on from this service and into the rest of your days, love yourself and one another, and save one another's lives by bearing witness. Willy-nilly, I say.